Hey, Dom.
Hey, Charles. Good to meet you.
Oh no, we got a Brit. Do we have a Brit?
I'm afraid so.
You do? God. Okay, hold on. I gotta mute myself just for 1 second because I want to say something. All right. So okay, we're gonna have some fun here because I love this stuff. I'm gonna promote your 20 for 20, and we're gonna talk about some of that stuff. And also we're just gonna have a good time. So here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody, this is Charles Dobbins, the founder of the Multifamily Investing Academy and your guest for this next upcoming podcast on my award-winning podcast show.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I got the American Apartment Owners Association Award for Best Podcast of 2022. And Dom, you'll find out why. When we're done, Dom, you're either going to find out why or be scratching your head wondering, how the hell did that guy get that award? I'll tell you that right now. So let me see. I'm just going to tell you, folks, Dom Beveridge is the principal with 20 for 20, which is an advisory service and a platform that publishes thought leadership in collaboration with multifamily technology companies. Okay. He's written a great white paper, 20 for 20, which I recommend everybody going to get. Let me just, I'm trying to find the website address.
Yeah, it's just 20for20.com. So 20for20.com.
Right. And so what you want to do when you get there, he's going to try to capture your email address. Okay. Give the guy creds for that, but he's going to pay for it. He's going to pay for it. And he's going to pay for it in the form of a great white paper where it's, I'm actually looking at it right now and I'm going to dig down deeper into it. Where the heck are you, white paper? Oh, you know what? He does it on HubSpot. What do you know? This guy's slick. This guy is slick. All right, but let's talk about trends. Let's talk about the biggest trend that's going on right now and how it's going to impact your life, Dom, and my life. Over the last week, Hailey Bieber has lost 10 million subscribers in her fight with Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez being an icon of our culture. How is Hailey Bieber's loss of 10 million subscribers going to impact you, Dom, and me?
I don't have a pre-baked opinion on that one. Do you want to give me a little bit of a prompt, maybe?
No, that's actually, you're answering it perfectly, because that is the question. This is the new trend. Is people say, hey, what's going to happen? How is Hailey Bieber going to impact, with Selena Gomez? And you wait for the person's response. And if the response is anything like yours, then you're good. Okay, now I know, Dom, you and I are brothers. We can talk, because I don't have.
Did you make that story up? Is that
no? That is really the big thing, and that
okay.
in the the TikTok world and in the Twitterverse, I guess Hailey Bieber, who's married to Justin Bieber, I think, she said something to diss Selena Gomez, and everyone loves Selena Gomez. I mean, she's on a TV show with Steve Martin and Martin Short. You've got to love her. I mean, she's good peeps. And
so it's it reminds me, and I'm going to date myself here, but I remember back in the mid-90s, I was working in the travel industry, and I was at a travel technology conference, and it was a presentation by the global, one of the global distribution systems, like the airline ticket systems, about this new thing, like these new website things that were starting to disintermediate the industry. And somebody in this presentation came up with, do you know that the most searched thing on the internet at the moment is Leonardo DiCaprio? And there's this like around the room. And it was just like, oh, this frivolous thing that.
No, but then you and I, looking back on it, okay, so we buy that keyword and we put all our advertising on that. And now we know what to do with that information. Back then we had no clue. It's crazy. So, okay, first of all, where are you right now?
I'm in Houston, Texas.
Oh, are you really? Okay, so you're actually, okay, so it's still a little early for you, but Let me ask you this: you're dealing in trends. You work for with a Real Data for a while. So, one of the things I was just talking to my lead consultant, and we're talking about, if there's a checklist of things you need to review and analyze about a market before you choose that market. Like, what would you look at if you're going into a market? And this is strictly for multifamily, investing in multifamily. What types of data would you start with when analyzing a marketplace?
So when I think about markets for what I do, I'm thinking about the companies that service multifamily. So I'm thinking about prop tech, I'm thinking about rent tech, like it's all technology. I mean, but basically for me, the challenge that I spend most of my time solving with my clients is there's been huge influxes of VC cash into technology that services our industry for a number of years now. What it means is that more and more companies get funded. There's more and more sort of functional overlap between the way that different solutions work. There are more and more vendors, and it's just very, very difficult to stand out in a market, particularly if you're a technology that's doing something differently from other people. So when I think about markets, or the markets that I serve in particular, I'm looking for, this is just my own perspective. I'm looking for problems where there's a real benefit in understanding how the potential buyer thinks about the stuff that you do, and where that matches the uniqueness of the product that you're trying to bring to market, right? So we tend to think about, when we try and sell stuff, we tend to think in broad terms about things like ROI. Well, if I tell them they make all this extra NOI, then that's going to sell. Most of the time, it isn't. Like you're selling to people who are hearing the same thing from every vendor that they talk to. There's something unique about what you do, and if it works, you really need to understand from the perspective of the person that you're trying to get to buy it, what it is that's going to be different about their business if they do this thing that you're proposing instead of the other 10 things that are being offered to them at the same time. So I tend to think about it that way, which goes a long way to explaining why I do this thing every year of of producing this white paper, because it's really beneficial to me to really press people on what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish, what they're asking their people to do, what that means in terms of technology, because it means I've just got a fairly robust idea about how people think about these things, and that tends to be how I look at markets.
Okay, let me throw out the most recent one that somebody came on my podcast and kind of pitched, and I was kind of like, okay, yeah, all right, I can see it. And what they were recommending, what they were selling to multifamily owners, was a service that you would walk into your units and put QR codes on all the appliances, on all the things that could possibly break, and then your maintenance person go around and scan it, and it would have let you know back in the office when that when that appliance needs to be replaced, when it needs to be serviced, and it can all of those things be totally automated. And I thought, geez, from a due diligence standpoint, if you're looking to buy the property, you can have that information. That's great stuff. That was the first I'd ever heard of anything like that. It's
asset tagging is what we call it. I think It's quite a new thing. I think it's really cool. It actually touches directly on one of the big themes that comes out of the white paper, which is about how people are just generally approaching maintenance, right? It's we can talk more about maintenance. I actually think it frames a lot of the way we think about physical stuff that goes into properties. But the cool thing about asset tagging is, you historically you put appliances into units, and you have some idea of how long the useful life of those assets is. And then when they go wrong, someone goes and fixes them. And right. Sometimes they have to fix them this fridge more frequently than that fridge. And that's just sort of how it works. There's this inherently quite reactive way about the way that multifamily approaches maintenance. And when I say that, I mean the sort of large 250, 300 unit plus
Right,
kind
right.
of
Class A
multifamily
property.
where there's a maintenance person or there's some maintenance people sitting in the property who go fix stuff like during the course of the day. Well, the idea with something like asset tagging is that we've got a database that has every single asset that we own in all of the properties that we have. And every time something happens with that asset, information goes into that database. And that means that now I know that when I get a service call about this fridge in this unit, this fridge is actually reaching the end of its useful life. So it may be premature, but it just is. Like, it's going to get more and more expensive to maintain that. Well, as one company was putting it to me, it's a way better customer experience if we just show up with a new fridge and replace it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's probably economically better for us as well.
Yeah.
And so just being able to leverage data about that to just make better decisions that have multiple different benefits. I think it makes a ton of sense if you've got
the thing I was looking at is it makes a ton of sense from a depreciation and a cost seg standpoint too. So, all right, let's dig into this white paper a little bit. First up, so everybody understands it, the title of the white paper is 20 for 20. Subtitle is 20 Conversations with Senior Multifamily Executives about the Outlook for 2022 and beyond. All right, so first question I have for you is kind of a specific one. And one of the first things you have in one of the highlight boxes kind of took me for a loop. You said, or it says, that about a quarter of the respondents say their firms plan to get into single family rentals in 2022. And I looked at that and I thought, oh boy, this is you look at some of these hot markets like Houston, well, not so much Houston, but Austin, Phoenix, Boulder. Their single family market is crashing right now. And then I thought to myself, okay, well, maybe is a good time to be rushing into the market in 2022. What are these quarter of the respondents? What was their justification? What was the reason for doing that?
Yeah, well, so it sounds like you're reading last year's edition, because that was a finding last year. I mean, people are still doing that this year, but that was more of a story like a year ago. The thing with single family, it was so there's two types of single family broadly, right? There's scatter buy, which is we're going to buy lots of houses and build a rental portfolio out of them. And there's build to rent, which is which is kind of horizontal multifamily, right? It's we're going to buy bigger lots, we're going to put single family homes on them, and we're going to run it like a really large multifamily property. And there's there's various sort of reasons to do that, right? So if you think about it, like people have been moving in. There's been a trend that was kind of accelerated somewhat by COVID, where people were working from home more, which meant they had this appetite to have more land to be on, and that was a driver of people just wanting people's household formation habits kind of changing somewhat. The other thing, though, is that lots of first-time buyers are not traditional first-time buyers are not buying houses. They're but they still want to live in them, right? So it's partly because there's lots of markets where people are just priced out of them. You just can't find a starter home where people can make the numbers work. So the step out of an apartment is not always into a home that I own. Sometimes there's the opportunity for somebody to move out into a single family home that they're going to rent. Part of that is to do with price. Part of that is just to do with changing preferences. Like if you talk to the people that have been putting big investments into build to rent properties, people, sort of millennial generation, would be home buyers often are just more comfortable with the idea of how they buy more stuff on subscription, right? So housing feels more like something that I would just pay rent for, in exchange for which I don't just get a house. I get someone to mow the lawn. I get really good internet. I get maintenance in the property. The value proposition of housing is like for many other things is somewhat different for that demographic. So for a variety of reasons like that, this class of development has just become more and more popular with developers. It's interesting. I talk in this year's book as well. I've just generally got this feeling that the other model, like the scatter buy model. So if you think of the sort of progress residentials, like companies like that, and this very, very fragmented industry of single family property managers, there are lots of innovations that are forced on that model because it's their individual units and they're not close together. There are innovations in the way that you service those properties that I think are very applicable to multifamily. So a really good example historically is the example of self-guided tours, right? So it took a long time for multifamily operators to get, in fact, basically took a global pandemic for multifamily operators to get comfortable with the idea of people showing themselves around their properties. When we did the first ever set of interviews for 20 for 20, we just found complete resistance to the idea of self-guided tours and multifamily, right? People would say, when you would talk about it, people would say too risky. You know, what if somebody steals stuff out of the property? What if somebody falls over? Like, we don't want strangers walking around unaccompanied in our buildings and so on. And what we said at the time was that this has been working really well in single family for a long time. Now, granted, there's lots of considerations that are specific to multifamily that you have to figure out, but generally the reward versus the risk of giving people the flexibility of going to see a unit when on their time is so great that multifamily should figure it out. The parallel that I draw to that in this year's book is, I think the way that single family does maintenance is they're better at using resources than multifamily are, right? In multifamily, the maintenance delivery model, if I've got a 300 unit property, is I typically have 3 maintenance techs who permanently work in that property. And they fix stuff as work orders come in, and do day-to-day sort of business as usual kind of maintenance. Single family, the way that it works is that every time a work order comes in, you have to make a decision about who's going to do that work, when are they going to do it, how much is that work going to cost, and that just kind of forces this level of coordination and this level of discipline on maintenance. That means you use your resources way better than the traditional model that we have in multifamily. So when I talk to the asset, that's what I immediately thought of when you started describing asset tagging. Because the more I start to figure out ways to coordinate the activities that we're doing across multiple different properties, the better we get at thinking about the kinds of work that we do and the kinds of services that we deliver, and what are the best ways to do it. And for me, that's a model where I think multifamily can learn from the single family model. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. You bring up 2 things here. First off, let's get back to the self-guided tours first. I had a client, just a small operator, 100 units that they owned themselves up in the Michigan area. And they had created this self-guided tour concept before. I had never seen it anywhere else. And they used YouTube, and they shot videos. Every one of their property units has a video, and they can just plug and play and send it out to the person. This is the first time I ever saw this concept of self-guided tours. Now, you're saying that the single families have been leading the charge on this model. And because of the world that you live in, dealing with these types of vendors, is there someone out there? Is there some company out there that is creating a kind of a plug and play model for self-guided tours for multifamily properties? Yeah,
there are definitely vendors that are doing it. So a couple of things that I'll say about that. One is, so the fascinating experiment was the lockdown period of COVID, because even people who were curious about doing self-guided tours were still, okay, well, we have to figure out exactly how the thing works. And then all of a sudden, everyone had to say, all of our tours are self-guided because we can't do in-person tours anymore. So they had to figure it out really quickly. And the vast majority of companies just delivered this using like the key on a stick approach, right? It's just here's a bag with a map and a key. Pick it up and go let yourself in, and don't take your mask off.
and lock up and turn the lights off before you.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that was interesting because what a lot of companies learned was like the sort of tricky things that you have to figure out good solutions for are not mostly about technology. It's about, all right, well, how do you, I mean, it's somewhat about technology. How do you organize the follow-up? Someone comes and does a tour, then they leave. What's the next step that gets them down the path towards leasing, right? So that's a coordination problem. The other one is things like, how do you deal with the fact that someone does a self-guided tour and just accidentally leaves their Starbucks cup in the unit, right? So we need some coordination to make sure that the place is sparkle ready every time someone goes in there. So people had to iron out all of those kinks. The interesting thing about technology vendors is that they're not. They're all sort of solving the problem differently. So you've got, if I throw out a few examples. Like, so Tour24 is a very popular application in multifamily. Theirs is a model where it's basically like a curated technology-enabled tour of the property, where the app is going to guide you around the property. So people refer to it as sort of museum-style tours, where you're sort of taking control of the tour using technology and some collateral that you put around the property. So that's one model. There's a company called Rently, who were very successful in single family. But their model is basically like lockboxes. So it's a combination of lockboxes and a sort of marketing, marketing sort of workflow that organizes the follow-up and also enables you to book the tour. So it solves that set of problems. But your tour kind of starts with going to a lockbox somewhere on the property. That's, as you can imagine, that's the dominant way that you would do it in single family, right? It's I mean, it makes real sense to do it that way. And then you have smart tech vendors, so the companies that do access control. So people like Dwello or Smart Rent or companies like this they've added, obviously they provide the complete systems of locks and exterior building access control and everything that enable you to access the unit that you're going to tour. And they've put a layer of technology that enables you to book all of that tour and get issued with the codes that will get you into the building and into the unit. So it's always interested me that every vendor in that space is kind of attacking the problem in a completely different way. It's not really a category of technology in the same way that sort of CRM or maintenance or is where everybody kind of knows everybody roughly kind of does stuff in the same way.
Yeah. That's like I went to a conference just a month or so ago, hotel owners and hotel vendors. The whole idea behind what the hotel industry is trying to do is get entirely away from any personal interaction or involvement from the moment you walk through the doors to the time you check out. If you can go in there with an app on your phone to get you into your room, to order room service, to do all that type of stuff, that's where they're going. And the reason why they were doing is labor costs. One particular hotel vendor was saying that their labor costs went from $8 an hour to $18 an hour within a 24-month period. And they said, that's just, we didn't budget for that. And that's a big change for us. Now, let's get back to what you were saying before, where the multifamily world can learn from the single family world, especially as it comes to, and I'll use our term, work orders. If we're sitting around looking at our Yardi, management system, the maintenance guy pulls up his work orders for the day, and you're saying that the single family industry has created a more efficient model as to how they handle that than the multifamily maintenance people do. Explain that for me.
Yeah, so the thing I was saying before about so single family, because there's no on-premise part of it, like all the maintenance has to be delivered. You have to go to that property to deliver whatever it is that needs to be delivered. Whereas in multifamily, you've just got this capacity within each individual property. The incentives are in single family are to be as efficient as possible in lowering the cost of going to that property.
Yeah.
In multifamily, it's more like as work comes in, it's just going to consume this labor that we have to pay for anyway. So there's a much more natural. So first of all, you've got this problem that you have to solve in single family that mostly you don't in multifamily, but also generally the incentives to be more efficient are much stronger in the single family environment, where there's often a direct cost associated with every trip that you would make to a property. So the thing I was saying before, where every time a work order comes in, I have to decide who's going to do this work. Is it one of my people? Is it an external resource? When can it be scheduled? How much does it cost? If you look at multifamily, the model basically doesn't have to answer any of those questions. Now, because I'm having to make these decisions at single family, that means to do it well, I have to get good at triaging stuff, right? I have to get good at dispatching stuff. I have to have a network of vendors, so I know when it's something my team can't do. I've got enough kind of credentialed vendors who can perform that service that I can maintain the service level to my residents. In a cost-effective way. That whole set of disciplines, and if you think about what it takes to sort of be good at to be good at that, you've got to when you're addressing each individual work order in that way, you start to be able to build up this picture of the types of work that you're doing, right? So how much HVAC servicing do we do? Is that ultimately something that is better done by a W-2 employee of mine, or is it something that I should be using vendors for? And each sort of set of maintenance activities is like that. One of the interesting things that we're beginning to see in multifamily is people starting to outsource turns, like unit turns. So turns, if I think about maintenance, broadly there are three different types of maintenance. There's turns, there's proactive maintenance, and there's what I'd call business as usual, just fixing stuff as and when it comes up. And turns are they have this very different cadence to them, right? So turns, you have big spikes when people move in and move out, because there are seasonal patterns to when people move in and move out of properties. So there's periods where you have lots and lots of turns to do, and periods where you have very few. If you're operating in multifamily in Minneapolis, you don't have many turns to do in the winter months, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right, but you've got many to do in the spring and the summer, months, right? So we've got this sort of spikiness in the way that it happens. But the other thing is, it's kind of predictable as well. We sort of roughly, because we know when leases end, we can make a pretty good guess at how much of this work we've got to do. So an interesting model is that, well, since we've got these predictable spikes and we kind of know exactly what a turn looks like most of the time, that's a set of projects that we could just outsource to a third party, right? Who comes to us with a technology platform, a vendor base, a methodology, a project management methodology, like who's just really good at doing that. And that means, we take that FTE off our property, and now we're left with a smaller problem of basically balancing proactive and reactive maintenance of our assets.
But,
right, so
you take that FTE off of your books, and then you replace it with a much more manageable, consistent expense that can just match up with the end of a lease, and you know exactly what it's going to cost you at that time, instead of having to keep that person on. Okay, that's a great idea. Now,
yeah, no, it's interesting, and that's how a lot of companies look at that. And interestingly, I think some of the most interesting vendors in this space are coming from single family housing, like in maintenance. You notice it about some of the people who have the most sort of interesting and sort of forward-thinking viewpoints on this. They're people that have moved from single family into the multifamily market, and it's because I think these models, there's many aspects of these models that look better to me.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, let's I gotta watch the time here, but I want to bring it in for a close. Tell me, what was your biggest takeaway with the new version of the 2020 from previous? What did you learn the most, or what surprised you the most about this edition?
Well, the thing that I mean, I guess it surprised me, but it's more the thing that has been on my mind the most, and also, so the way I run this research, I run these 20 interviews at the end of the year, and then when just before the paper comes out, I go through the findings with the 20 interviewees, and those are fascinating conversations, because that's where, if I'm an operational leader, I'm sort of now comparing my plans and what I did last year to what this group of 20 other people did. So you get very interesting sort of thoughts about what this all means. But the big theme that we talk about a lot is centralization, right? So this confluence of factors, right? The fact that in 2023 we know that deal volume is going to be lower for the foreseeable future. That's an opportunity, right? Because if I'm not having to onboard as many properties, if I'm an operator, that means I've got some bandwidth to get some stuff done that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do, because onboarding is time consuming, right? So you've got this confluence of this opportunity, some technologies like some AI related technologies, some technologies that have really been designed to help people run portfolios in a more centralized manner. People have really been thinking about and acting on how they can change the staffing model. You've always had this thing in multifamily where they call it the 1 to 100 ratio, right? For every 100 units, I have one team member of maintenance, one team member of property management, and there's enough technology out there that can do enough of the more routine tasks that people do, that we can consider models where we have greater specialization, right? So if leasing has always been done by putting a leasing agent in a property and having them answer the phones and having them do the tours and everything. Well, if I've got some combination of high volume of self-guided tours, I've got AI that can handle most of the incoming inquiries more effectively than having someone just pick the phone up and repeat the pet policy 20 times a day. Yeah. Like if I'm taking these pieces of the activity off the plate of the human at the property, I can redeploy those resources to make them really specialized in the sales activities I need them to be good at. So let's have AI answer the phone and nurture people through to the time we book the tour. And let's have humans focused on bringing the deal in, right? On being the point of escalation when a conversation needs to be had, on closing leases where somebody's already been for a tour, for example. Yeah. People are trying to figure out models like that. There are several companies that have already been successful in doing that, but lots of companies, you can tell, are still, they aspire to a model like that, but you can tell figuring out exactly what's that going to look like for me. The companies that are successful in doing that are, for example, typically companies that have lots of properties in the same market. So it's a sort of easier step to take, because I can still have some leasing agents working between multiple different properties. I just need fewer of them, right? That's an easier step than if my properties aren't that close together. Well, all right, how do I get from this model to a more centralized one if it's not feasible for people to drive from one property to another, for example? So people are thinking about, all right, what piece of this technology process and an organizational change thing is for me? And that's probably the biggest conversation in this year's book, because you just see a pretty big variety of you see a consistency in it being a problem that people want to solve, but a really big variety in how they think they can solve it.
Very interesting. Dom, thank you so much for being on my show. And now you can go back to, resting and relaxing, because I know you had to get up real early for this one, being in Houston. But no, everyone, listen, you got to go to 20for20.com. That's where you can get his white paper, and it's a great read. I highly recommend it. I picked up some cool stuff already, and especially now, I don't know if this is a cultural difference here, Dom, but I learned a new term here today, and you probably didn't even pick up on it, but I've always said when a unit is ready to be relet, to be released, we call that unit rent ready. but it looks like the Brits call it sparkle ready. And I'm going to start using that term from now on. I like that one so much better. So I wrote it down. So, hey, Dom, so great to have you on the show, and let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.